Hey everybody. Let me see how to fix my screen. This one here. There we go. There we go. Welcome everybody to The Voice in the Hollow. My name is Miguel Ortega, and this is my co-host Tran.
Hey.
I did it different this time. Oh, and
Yeah.
Alex is here. The pressure's on. So we're doing a weekly diary showing the making of a short film entirely in Unreal 5, and we're not the greatest experts in Unreal, so we're taking you through our journey to figure out all this stuff. So this is week 10, so we've been at it for a bit, and this week we have two parts. So at this point, I'm kind of handling just the individual shots, just dealing with the day-to-day, fix this shot, grab the motion capture, put it in, whatever. I'm not caring at all about lighting or anything at this point. It's just making shots. And Tran is grabbing the stuff that we've already created and making it better. And you'll see some of the stuff today. It actually looks like ridiculously beautiful. So, yeah. So one of the things that I had to deal with this week was just finalizing some of the rigs. We ended up doing a bunch of corrective shapes on the stuff with our friend Chris Boschatnik, but also putting together like a rough edit of some of the stuff. So we definitely don't have everything right now. And figuring out the biggest thing that we really wanted to figure out, and the thing that I've been kind of freaking out the most about, is what pipeline are we going to use? How do you do this bridge between Maya and Unreal? So we've shown some of the live link stuff before, but I don't necessarily know if that's the method we were going to use. Are we going to use Alembic files? Are we going to bring in an FBX and bring in the animation data that way? That's what we wanted to do, but since we have to simulate all the clothing, we're going to have to do this all with Alembic. How do we lay this out? The other problem you have is a lot of our environments are done in Unreal. So again, all the lighting here is completely throwaway. Probably this entire set is throwaway with the exception of maybe the position of where the feet are. But so you lay out all this stuff in Unreal, and now you have to animate your character in Maya. How do they connect? Because Unreal can handle 10 trillion polygons like nothing, and if you bring in that set into Maya, it would have a heart attack. So you can't bring in the entire set. How do you even bring in the set if you wanted to? And does everything actually line up? And it doesn't. So we had to figure out all these problems this week, which drove me bananas. But so we'll start with some of that stuff here. So my first idea was like, okay, I have the mocap, I have the rig of this character, and this is not going to be that hard. All I have to figure out how to do is grab the plane from, or whatever the terrain is from, what were you saying, Unreal, and bring it into Maya, and then I'll just be able to do the cameras. I just really need to see the plane, I thought. That presented a bunch of problems once you have a set that's this dense, because I would set up cameras. I thought they looked great in Maya. I'd bring it back into Unreal, and it was going right through a tree. It was going right into the ground. Since there's rocks everywhere, I didn't bring in every single rock, so it was a disaster. So what was the workflow? So this is what I ended up figuring out. So the first thing, let's say I wanted to animate this character here. How do I get this ground back into Maya? And I know that sounds super stupid, and some of you people might be like, oh, that's so simple to do. Obviously, I didn't know how to do it correctly, and every time I was exporting this out, it didn't line up correctly. So this is what I was doing. Let's say this ground here, I would go to actors, right? Merge actors, and let me just make sure that the setting that I ended up turning on was the default settings, which was this. And I would export this. So I'd go to merge actors so that I would combine all those pieces into a single mesh, the pieces that I selected. And let me just call it like, okay, so I would save that out. And then you can see if I grabbed that same floor and I threw it back in there and I zeroed it out, it's in a completely different location. If I try to find it, it's down here. So when you would bring that into Maya, it would be in the exact same place. And I was like, oh my God, how the hell does this work? Because there was a misalignment there, which was a pain in the ass. So how do you do that? So it's actually very simple once you know how to do it. So it's funny because it's going to be like 5 seconds worth of demoing. But when I was trying to figure this out, it drove me nuts for hours. But basically, if I select these objects.
Sorry, there's not a lot of documentation on this type of stuff. Like if you go on YouTube, you can find how to do this one thing, right? But there's not really pipeline type stuff. And there's no workflow.
Yeah.
And the workflow is very critical for us to actually get stuff done.
Yeah. So here, if I select like all these pieces here and I go to actor, merge actors, this is like the magical settings here. You have to go to the settings first and you have to turn on this pivot point at 0. Okay. If you do not do that, it kind of, I'm assuming it's like setting the pivot back to 0, like center pivot in Maya. And then when you re-import it in, it brings it back in at 0, 0, 0, which is a disaster. So this maintains the offset. So now if I press merge actors, let's go back to this. So I have a folder here. Let me call it TP. So you know it's pivot point, and I export that out. Now you could see if I grab this, let me make sure I have the right one, and I drag it back in there and I zero it out, it is in the exact same position. Okay, so that was huge for us because I was like, oh, okay, this is a huge deal. So now I could export this guy out. So I could come over here. I could go to Asset Actions, Export, and I can go to, well, let me just export it as that, Gnomon Floor PP. Okay. I've noticed that when I export it as an OBJ, it could sometimes get wonky. So I'm going to export it just as an OBJ, the default settings, and I'm going to export this out. Okay. So, all right, that's cool. So I thought, oh, I'm good to go. Now I have the ground, right? And now I could just start animating the shot. So this is like, we did an early edit of the sequence here. So this is, you'll see some of the animation on the hands needs to be reanimated. I'll get into why in a minute. But you could see we got it all working, or so we thought. So this is a scene where the two girls just finished hunting this creature that we showed a few weeks ago. And now one of the girls lost her spear. And this is where she stumbles into the hollow, the cave that is our evil location. So
Jamani.
there's no animation on the faces at all at this point.
Nitakuwa nimeurusha kwa nguvu sana, siuoni kweli.
That would cut into that. So we thought, oh, this is pretty great. I have this all figured out. We're good to go. Soon as I brought this back into Unreal, I realized that, like I said, it was a complete disaster. The cameras were cutting through everything, and I realized I need to be able to see the set even more. Now I could keep exporting pieces, and one of the things that you'll notice here, if I bring this piece that I brought in, or that I exported, sorry, is when it brings it in here, it gives you some of the levels of detail. So you can see it brought it in, and it's not bringing it in at the highest resolution, which is even better because this is all we ultimately need, right? So this is what it brought in. So I was like, okay, I'll just create the camera here, and I'll lay this out, and this will be super simple. I could just go to camera settings, resolution gate. This is going to be super simple. Now, so much of the composition relies on what is in the background, the direction of the light, all these things that are the strength of Unreal, that to do it like this is kind of idiotic because you're throwing away a lot of information and a lot of potential. You could reframe stuff just based on, one of the great things about Unreal is you could stumble onto a shot. You'll literally like create a new camera, the camera randomly lands somewhere, and you're like, damn, that's a pretty cool shot. And then we'll end up using it somehow. So you're not gonna get that happy accident in Maya. Like, it looks like this. You're not gonna get inspired if it lands like that. You're not gonna go, wow, look at that angle, or look at this angle. It all looks pretty ugly. So even though this looked cool in the edit, in terms of the story, you understand, you know, clearly she's looking for something. She finds a spear. This we're probably gonna have to show the foot actually kicking the spear, because she's hiding the spear. She doesn't want her sister to know that the spear actually ended up here and it's broken, which we don't have it here as a broken piece yet. So she's hiding it because she's the lesser of the two. And the sister, of course, doesn't buy it. And then she hears the sound and she walks. So all of that, for the most part, except for the broken spear stuff, is pretty clear, at least to me. I could see it and I'm like, oh, okay, I know that once the voices are there, sorry, the faces there, everything is gonna read correctly. But I still needed to get this a little bit better. So what was the pipeline that I ended up realizing was the most important thing? Oh, here's another thing. The foot contacts, because of the extra rocks and whatever, unless you export everything, the feet wouldn't necessarily line up where you wanted them to be, whatever. Anyway, you'll see what I ended up doing here, my point here. So what I ended up doing is I brought in the FBX rig. So I went over here and I just grabbed the rig and I exported this out as an FBX file, okay? And I brought it into just the default settings, nothing fancy. And I brought it into Unreal, just the standard, you know, import, select your OBJ, your FBX. And I think I just set it to like -90 degrees, if I'm not mistaken, okay? So then what you have to do is you go to create animation, and we go to animation blueprint, so right here, and it's going to ask you to select any one of these. So we're just going to go to Koa body skeleton, create, so we have it here, and I'll just call this delete live link for now, just so I know what it is. Come over here. Oh. Okay, and I'll go to live link, close. Okay. Now, at the moment, you'll see that there's nothing to connect it to. So what I have to do is I'm going to come over here to Maya, and I'm going to open up under my plugins, which you have to install. You have your live link. Okay. So you set all this up, and I have this on my shelf already, and we have this. Okay. So you would select this joint right here, the root joint of your skeleton. And we're going to go through cameras in a second. And you go to add selection. This is another thing that kind of threw me off. Which one of these things do I select for it to drive the main thing? My first approach is to select the entire group node, right? Then to select the root control. So it was actually the root joint. So probably documented somewhere. I didn't find it right away. So now you know. So now you can see it's there, okay? And you can see it says connected. Now, if I go over here to my Unreal, I'm going to go to Windows, Virtual Production, and I'm going to turn on my live link, okay? And you would just go to Source, Message Bus, and you select your computer. So you can see my computer is, of course, named IG88, the greatest bounty hunter of all time. And we select that, and there it is. So you could see it's telling you all the objects that are currently being streamed. Root and editor active camera. Okay? So I could minimize this for now. I don't need it. And if I go back to Maya, you can see everything is connected. Everything is great. All right. So let's come back over here to our delete live link. And I could now plug this into this. And live link, set this to root. Press compile. And now you can see that it is moving. Okay. So now I could come over here. This is a very important part. Drag this in there. You need to set this back to 0. Okay, do not bring this in and just drag it in, or else the offsets are not going to be correct. I mean, I guess technically you could just drag it in there and then it would be transferring over from 0, 0, 0. But that's a sloppy workflow because you want to have everything at 0 in both programs and then offset it to get it to work the way you want, okay? So now that it's all zeroed out, so this is going to be a little bit tricky because I usually do this with 2 monitors. But now if I come over here and I select this, well, let's do a few things first. So let me find this in my viewport. So there she is. There she is in Maya. You can see there's another one there from another session. And you can see that when I move the legs around, let me just hide that one for now, the old one. Oh, that's actually the correct one. So let me hide this one. So you could see as I move this around, she's being animated, okay? So now what I have to do is just grab this and offset her to the position that I want. And now I have the position here because I have geometry. Okay, so let's come over here. And you can see that she's right there.
The very bottom.
The very bottom, yeah. So you could just place her wherever you want. You could see how it syncs up perfectly here. Okay. Now, so I thought, all right, hey, this is pretty great. So now I could come over here. I could load up the motion capture, offset it. Okay, so I could offset the position really easily. This one doesn't have mocap on it at the moment. But if I did, I would just put that on an animation layer, and maybe I could show that in a little bit. But now everything syncs up. So now I could load this in, figure out the camera positions in here, the mocap is moving, and everything is great. Your Unreal crashes, and everything is disconnected again. So it doesn't seem like a big deal if you have a project that has 2 cameras in it. But if you have an entire short that is probably going to have 100 shots, if you have to relink 100 cameras, it's completely idiotic. So you're like, whoa. So that's not a great work. And even the character would disconnect. So everything kind of disconnects, which is problematic. Oh, one thing that is very important. I should have mentioned this earlier. Give me 1 second. Super crucial on your character. I had already done it, but I just want to emphasize this. To make sure you turn on update animation in editor. If you do not turn this on, it will not show you the updates here. Okay?
It should be like default setting.
It should, yeah, I guess so, but for whatever reason, these are the type of things that when I show it to you, it's just like 2 seconds, but when I was trying to figure this out, like for hours screaming. So, all right, so there you go. So Now everything is synced up, everything is good. So now we want to create a camera. Okay, so I could just come over here and just create a camera. All right. What I could do here that is really powerful is I could go to Maya. I'm going to go to create, camera. So let's find it here. Okay. I'm going to go to my live link setting. You can see root is still there, and I'm going to select that camera 1. Okay. So I can minimize this. I just created the camera in Unreal as well. You can see Cinema Camera Actor. Okay. Go over to my details. Add live link controller. Come over here. There it is, camera 1. Disable, evaluate live link, and enable live link here, or evaluate live link. As soon as you do that, the camera will snap into position. And now you could go into Maya, panels, look through selected. Let me find my thing, view, camera settings, resolution gate. And you could find your framing, and it lines up here. Okay. So now again, this was like, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. But again, the minute this crashes, everything went to hell. So at a point I was like, you know what? I don't really care, because as long as I come over here, let's say select camera, and I go to frame 1 and I set a key, and then I come over here and I do this, set a key, maybe Unreal will crap out, that's fine, but I'll at least retain all the information inside of Maya. And that's the key. You have to look at live link not as like a final thing, but as like a placeholder of a, hold on, is that camera position updating correctly? Let me see. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to take a look at a few settings here. So my camera position is correct. So the rotation, I think it might be my film back size is different. So 35 millimeter, let's make sure that my back is the same. Give me 1 second.
You really do need like multiple monitors to actually do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe 3. 3 monitors.
Give me 1 second, guys. Let me set this up here. So just come over here to my camera. And I'm going to just turn this on to 35 millimeter Academy. So something is going a little bit funky here because it's not lining up. The rotations are fine, but the tree position is a little bit weird. But you can see the rotations are fine. If I come over here. So I'll figure it out in a second, but it's probably a user error that I did one of the steps sloppily. But you can see as I move this around, I think it has to do with my film back size, and I'll figure it out in a second. But it's synced up. So anyway, this was problematic because, again, as soon as I would restart, everything would go to hell. So what I ended up doing was selecting the camera once I was happy with it. And I will figure this out, but I'll probably pass it to Tran and then figure out what's going on. But what I would do here is once I had the keyframes in place and I knew that this is exactly what I wanted, I would just go to File, Export Selection. Okay. I would just come over here to my folder here, and I would just call this cam test. Okay. Make sure I have my animation exported, bake animation, all of that, and export selection. Okay. Then, if I want to, I can go back over here. Go to that camera. Let's create another one. And then go to Import. Gnomon test. And I would bring this. Now, this is another one that drove me bananas. I keep trying to bring in the camera, and it wouldn't bring in the information. You have to turn on this stupid setting, match by name only. It will not bring in the information unless they're both named exactly the same. And you would think that considering you're right-clicking on it, you're opening a file browser, you're selecting that it would know you're pretty committed at that point. It still would not bring it in. So disable this, import it, and you can see the two keyframes are there. And the animation is there. That setting is that it has absolutely something to do with my my film backsides, because you can see now the motion looks pretty exact to what I had here. Okay, so it's something stupid, but you could see that is the pipeline that I ended up doing. So the live link part was just for me to frame the shot so I could see it in Maya, but then I was ultimately saying, okay, this is good. I'm going to bring it in here and commit it, and now I have the keys in here. So now even if the live link breaks, it's not a big deal. I could just always at any point select the camera again and adjust it. Or if you already have these two keyframes in place, it's not that big of a deal to just come over here, move it just a little bit more, and add a keyframe, and it would override it or whatever. So that became the pipeline for the camera. So that was great. So again, the live link, just look at it like as an IPR render, but that's not how you want to link the two of them permanently. It's just an IPR render, okay? Like an interactive renderer. You're just looking at it, cool, you're laying stuff out, but ultimately you want to export that camera as an FBX file, right-click, import, and do it. Now, one thing that's really important is you want to make sure that you're managing all your stuff just in case you change anything here. You want to make sure that in Maya, you always have the same camera accessible. Right-click, export, same thing in reverse. Camera test, export that out now that you made a change in Unreal. And in Maya, you could import that, and now both cameras are constantly updated. So you could see, like if I look at this here, so this is my sequence. It's called Chase Kill, right? Every shot is named here. Come over here. You could have Alembic, all my Alembic files. My cameras are here. My geo exports, like the temporary stuff for placement. My Maya file, and then the raw motion capture. So I know that everything is here. Go back into your cameras. There you go. Some of the things that I did, sometimes when I would bring in the camera, it wouldn't update the focal length. So I started putting the focal length into the file name. That way I would always know, what was it again? I would just import, oh, I could see it right away. It's 200 millimeter. It's 120 millimeter. I didn't have to go and dig it up back in Maya in case, that file hasn't been opened for a while. I would always know what is what, okay? Same thing with my Alembic files. Oh, I don't have it on this one here. I don't have any files in there. But if I go to, let me find one that I actually have. Oh, it's because I still have FBX here. But I'll show you in a second. But basically, my Alembics would have the frame rate in the name as well. So it would be called like C-Spear wide _ 001 _ 400. So I knew that that was from frame 001 to frame 400. That way it was easy for me to manage it. I can't bring it in right now because I'm not using the cache importer. But if I went to cache import, I would see all the Alembics. And then I would see the names. So you can see that. Sure, 840 to frame 1000. Okay. All right. So now we know the characters are updating here. So whatever I do here, adjust the arm, come over here to Unreal, and her arm is updating here as well. Okay. Same thing here though. You do not want to rely on this because it's not actually creating the keyframes in here. So what I ended up doing is grabbing at the end of this sequence, I would look at everything. Everything looked fine. I would come over here, show none, then show polygons, select just the character, cache, Alembic cache, export selection to Alembic. Okay? So now this is a really crucial part, and this is something that I swear to God, I must have lost half a day figuring this crap out. So one of the things that I'm really happy about on this project is we shot the entire sequence with motion captures. There's 2,000 frames for that entire sequence. So now you're kind of cutting the cameras around almost like a live audience TV where you have multi-cameras. So it's really great. You could just get coverage and everything is 2,000 frames. So you could just move the camera around and it's going to tie in together perfectly. However, if you only need, let's say, frame 800 to 900, just as an example, so you do 800 to 900 of your Alembic file, right? And you would come over here and you would set this to time slider, or even if you went in there and manually put this 800 to 900, come down here, you turn on UV right and right color sets, and I would export this. Everything seemed like, yeah, this should work perfectly. I'm only exporting, in this case, 100 frames. No big deal. Simple. Because this is starting at frame 800, or in some cases even higher up, maybe frame 1800 to 1850 or whatever, when I would go over here to Unreal, the way I was bringing this in was like this. I'd come over here. I'll just put it in this folder. I'd go to import, right? So find my shots, find my sequence, find the shot in the sequence. So let's say, sure, this one's pretty high up there. I'd go to Alembic. You can see this is frame 840 to 1000. Okay, double click that. Give it a second. So now you have this here. Oh, this thing here. So I'll show you. You have to set this to skeletal. Okay, so we set this to skeletal. I'm going to merge the meshes in this case because I want everything to just be one Alembic. Okay. Base calculation type, we have all of these guys here. When I set it to percentage base, I thought like, okay, that's kind of the default setting. So I thought that's got to be good. I kept getting a bunch of messed up vertices just shooting out. Okay, that was problem number one. Now, problem number two is it would take about 40 minutes to import, and then it would just crash. And I was like, oh my God, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, go back in, adjust some of the settings, try to import it again, 40 minutes, crash again. You try another thing, 40 minutes, crash again. And I was starting to freak out. I'm like, even if this were to finally import, if it takes 40 minutes, an import, this is insane. It's like rendering. Yeah, this is like, okay, it's real-time rendering, but it's you need 10 GPUs to import. So I was like, this is terrifying. So what the hell? So problem number one, the vertices shooting out randomly. I had to set this to no compression, and that solved that. There might be a better setting, but for me, that's the one that seemed to work. Number two, I'm setting this to skeletal. So you would think that the geometry cache is the one that you want. This killed my machine, and it had all kinds of problems. Skeletal was the proper one, but the single biggest thing that is not documented anywhere that I saw, it just murdered me. It was the culprit of everything, was skip empty frames at start of Alembic sequence. Now I thought, hey, it's only exporting 800 to 900. There's 100 frames, right? So, and when I would bring it in, it brought in a little chunk that looked like about 100 frames. Apparently, I don't know for certain, but what I'm assuming is happening when you don't turn this on, this is not a default setting. If you're bringing in frame 800 to 900, it's bringing in 800 versions of your model from frame 0 to 799 that are completely useless. So basically, when you set this to skeletal, they're basically 900 blend shapes. So you're bringing in 800 of the same 800 or 799 of the same exact model that is not moving at all. That's why it was a 45-minute wait. And then it would bring in the 100 that you actually cared about. The file size was astronomical, and it would crap out. You have to turn this on. This thing, seriously, at least half a day to come to that realization, because I thought it was something on the other end. I thought the files are too big coming out of Maya. Maybe I need to make the sequence smaller and smaller and smaller, but it was just that. It still takes a couple minutes, but not a big deal. It takes like 5 minutes as opposed to 50 minutes or 45 minutes. Import that in. My rotation settings, I have them in a document here, because another thing that drives me nuts is OBJ is one rotation value, Alembic is another,
FBX is another.
FBX is another. So I'm just going to bring it in like that for now. And now I would have the baked camera and the baked animation, and I could feel pretty happy that everything is correct inside of Unreal. I could still make all the changes in Maya. I could keep updating the animation. I could change the foot position. I could keep using the live link to keep making things better, foot contact better. But once you're ready to bring it into Unreal as like, okay, you're good enough to be final, I would just export it as an Alembic file. The other problem with live link is when I was bringing it into Sequencer, and I had a sequencer edit, I had to press play in Maya in order for the characters to actually start moving inside of Unreal. So you would have to press play in Maya and then run to Unreal and press play again. And then the time was off, so the camera would start moving in front of the character because you had to press play in one and then press play in the other, and you obviously can't press play at the same time. So that was another problem. So it only really worked well when I was working on one shot at a time, because I could just move the slider and just kind of get the camera position and the cameras, the foot placements and whatever. But once you have a master sequence with multiple sequences, the live link wasn't very helpful because, again, the timelines didn't match. And I know there's a way to sync the timelines, but the time code, I mean, but it wasn't giving me the results that I was expecting. It's giving me a lot of issues. So this pipeline is what we're going to go with. Set up your cameras through live link, adjust your animation through live link, export FBX for the cameras, export Alembic for your characters. So now here's my Alembic brought in. Bring it in here. Let me find my details here. Reset the position. So I probably need to rotate this 90 degrees. Let me just find this character. 1 second. Okay, so there she is. This is just like a random Alembic file, right? This is not the one that I actually wanted to, that I exported. This is just one that I randomly brought in. Okay, so it's 90 degrees here. So the pivot is offset, you could see, which is a good thing, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. So this is a shot of our character looking at over here. All right. So let me zoom into that right there.
She looks squished.
Yeah, she looks squished. And I'll show you something that's pretty interesting. Right. So I'll select her. Okay. I'll throw her into the timeline. And then I have to go to animation. And it'll only show you the one that connects with her. Sure, 840 to 1000. You could see the frames are there. So what I would do here is I would say, okay, it's 840 to 1000. So I would come over here in this case, set the timeline to 840, put the in point. So I'll just show you here. Like I do like 840, set the in point to my timeline, and then 1000. Set my out point right here. Okay, and now you can see that's in the name. You can see the name is there, and then I would just place that in position. And you can see that while you're in there, she does not look squished at all. The minute you get out of that Alembic section, she gets squashed. It's weird, but that's how it is.
So weird.
Yeah. But that worked perfectly for us. So let me set this back to 0 here.
That's the kind of stuff that can just make you crazy.
Yes.
When on import, you're like, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get rid of that. I'll get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. Okay. And let me find. So now that I have all of that in place, again, this lighting is terrible at this moment. You can see we still have her there, so I'm not going to use her anymore. So let me just find that and hide her for the moment. So now I've gone in and created a sequence for each one of the shots. So that's as simple as like you could come over here. So animation level sequence, right? You would double click on this guy like this. You could create your camera. Like I said, import. So that's our Shure camera. So I would just go to K, shots, chase kill, that's Shure cameras. I ended up using the 200 millimeter, match by name only turned off. There it is. Okay, so that's great. And then I would find my mocap here. And you can see that it looks weird because I don't have enough frames. So let me set this to like 1000. Okay, animation, link the animation. So this is frame 840 to 1000. So I would just set this to 840. I know this is where it's supposed to start. I would set this as my in position. Let me give this a couple more frames. And now you can see everything syncs up. The only thing I have to animate manually, which you can't do in Maya that I know of, is like your focus pool. So I would just come over here and adjust that. And now you can see she's responding and whatever. So yeah, so that's basically it. So pretty simple. A lot of steps, but it's this thing saved. This is the pipeline we're going to use. So now if I look at all of this here, so now you have this one sequence. All you have to do is you create another sequence, right?
I was thinking the same thing that Alex just said.
Which is what? What do you think?
Yeah,
it's not. It's. Well, you can see why. Yeah, I don't have that many cool things to show this week because this is what I was figuring out. But you can see here. Now I have all of this connected. So again, the lighting is horrific, and also when we jumped from 2000 from 5 whatever release to the new one, the lighting looks even worse. But you could see here how it's all cutting together. There's going to be some weird jumping between shots, which I think is just like geometry updating. You get like that right there.
This is a big achievement for us to have this working.
The faces are not animated, so they look a little bit wonky. So you can see the one that we just created is there. So this is going to look way better, but this is just showing how it's all working together.
Yeah, the focus is not good lighting or any of that. It's to really have an edit, right?
Yeah.
So looking at this is like a previous pass. But now, once this is done, you can go in there and you can improve the lighting, improve the modeling, and then kind of polish it. Yeah, and set dress it. You have to dress for the shots, and if you don't have shots, you have nothing to dress.
Yeah. So there's like the broken spear. But you can see, like this one, for example, when I was doing this shot in Maya, you could see it here. I thought, wow, that's a nice camera move. It's following along with her. She sees the spear at the end. Great. And when I brought it here, well, this guy was basically, I was underneath this rock the entire time. So you do have to use the live link thing. Yeah, just to set up your shots, to visualize it. But again, export the camera as an FBX. Just run through it one more time. Select your camera, right click, import, select the camera, right? Make sure you disable the use the exact name or whatever, and that will work. And then the geometry, just Alembic, turn off that delete unused frames. But yeah, so that was my week trying to figure this all out, trying to put this first pass of the edit, trying to make it as tight as possible. I don't try to, like, even though I put this in here as a semi-edit in here with this master sequence, I would never edit in here. Like I don't like editing here. I think it's terrible. I rather just render out each sequence by itself, give it like a couple frames, even like a buffer, and I would just do everything in Premiere, which is so much faster and so much easier to work with. So I would still do the edit here, but now I know it's working with the sound. The timing is exactly what I want.
I would be stressed out trying to edit this.
Nitakuwa nimeurusha kwa nguvu sana.
Unreal.
Siuoni? Kweli.
So yeah, so that's my week of stress. But that's it. We have the pipeline down. That's how I would recommend anybody that is a Maya user to work between the two of them. Let me see if there's any questions here. Any questions?
Well, I have a few comments. The more steps that you have in the process while you're working, there's more potential for user error, right? And everything that we have to do is manual, so we don't have we're not a company that has like someone that can write scripts. So I guess at a company, you can have someone that writes a script and creates like a little GUI or and then you can just press button and then everything feels more automated and everything's named correctly and everything's organized. In this case, you have to be so organized.
Yeah.
The more steps, the more potential for trouble. But
Yeah, like when the camera didn't line up perfectly with Maya with the live link, for sure that was something that the connections were all right, but my film back size is different, or it's a 100% a step that I did wrong. It had nothing to do with the live link portion of it. It was just something else. I was having a lot of problems because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna show setting up the rig stuff or exporting the geometry right before I was doing right before this demo. Sorry, before the stream, and I couldn't get the geometry to line up again. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And it was that the blueprint version of the skeleton was not zeroed out. So everything was actually working, but one step was slightly off. So the geometry was exporting at the right place, but the model was slightly offset on the rig. So it looked like they were disconnected. So it's pretty much always user error. So,
yeah.
But anyway, does anybody have any questions on that, or do you want me to go over this? Yeah. Thanks, Dylan. Alex says pretty simple. Yes, pretty simple.
Like I'm always amazed by what Miguel does. Like he's just explaining it actually pretty simple, but there's not a documentation. There's not a tutorial going, you must do step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you can just follow it. Basically, there's just black empty space as he's moving forward, and he just has to figure out everything, right? And then you can see by some of the options, it's like check empty frames, check this, check that, and it's not like any of those check boxes when you read it out actually like goes, oh yeah, totally, that's what that is, right? So to me, it's like incredibly impressive that he's able to work this out and figure it out. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks, because honestly, once I figure it out, I'm like, how the hell did I figure this crap out? Like, I'm like borderline Forrest Gump. How the hell did I figure this out? So, yeah, but somehow, yeah, that was a huge thing. Like, this was a huge sign of relief once this was all working, because I was like, okay, now I know how we're gonna bring this back and forth. So, but anyway, so that's that. We also recorded the men voiceovers, which was great. So we got that out of the way. I won't play that for you because we did that last week. I'll show it once I have it in an edit, which I don't have it yet. But that's been a pain in the butt because of the time difference when I'm recording. So I have to wake up like at 6 a.m. to record that. So but yeah. So now Tran is going to show you something that's really freaking awesome.
Well, before you take this out, like as Miguel and I are working, and I think that's kind of a topic, at least when I talk to students, because I also teach at Gnomon, I talk to them a lot about mental state, right? And mental state is really critical while you're working. So for us, as Miguel is trying to figure this out, the more that you panic, the more you just snowball and you can collapse and fall apart. The other thing that happens while we're working is it's really important for us to maintain routine and schedule and all this stuff and just try to keep a really cool head. So I'm always super impressed when Miguel figures this out, because the more you wander into like a dark space and not know something, the more you just start freaking out and panicking. Like there's no one holding your hand through this process. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So do you want to show that? So Tran will show you something way cooler than this.
Hold up. Let me
I'll give like a little head start as to what you're going to show. So the ceremony sequence with the golden jaguar or leopard, sorry. Tran thought correctly that we could take it to another level. So passed it on to her, and she just took it to pretty amazing level. So you guys will.
He's hyping it up, but
I'm definitely hyping it up because of the Looks awesome.
Okay, so I'll show what I have here. And let's switch to this format here. So,
which, by the way, before you show, this is what we do with every project we've ever worked on. We redo every scene like 3 times. Everything. Yeah.
I don't know if it's called a redo.
It's a polish.
Yeah, it's a polish. So this is where I'm at right now, and far away it looks kind of similar, but I basically went in and tried to beef up these areas that I felt that could be improved. So right now, I think it feels more like an altar, right? Whereas last week, the only thing I really had was just this cat statue and basically just this platform. So I've added in all these guys, placed more candles around it, right? And then just added some lighting and then some carpeting here. But you can see, this feels much more like an altar or where like a ceremony is going to take place, right? Let me actually load up, give me 1 second, my sequencer so I can show a few shots here.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Jared. That's a huge compliment. Over here, where last week I basically didn't have anything, it was just completely empty space, right? So this is where Koa is going to watch. I mean, she's naked right now. No one has clothes, but Koa is going to watch her sister, Ala, in the ceremony. And so we had to make sure that there's something cool to actually look at here. Another area that I was beefing up was basically the reverse shot. So there really wasn't much of anything going on in the reverse shot. So this is pretty important. And it's not just going to be a wide. You can see I have Koa as placement here for scale. And at the end of this sequence, she's going to kind of storm out of here. And I kind of wanted to feel different. So as I was doing this, right, I was just trying to picture her. You can see I can't zoom anymore. Give me 1 second. It just stops. Right? I just picture her running through here and it turns really dark. And at some point I was like, oh, this is too dark. I'm like, wait, this is kind of cool. Like we just move into the blackness and we move into this kind of claustrophobic, kind of ceremonial
incredible
hall, right? And if you look around, there's all.
Tran is not saying this at the moment, but those are all, she modeled all of this.
Yeah, I sculpted.
I
sculpted these. Yeah. So I did this all this week here, right? So yeah, so this is what's happening here. And then I think some of the framing, when Miguel comes in to frame it, there's a lot more, I don't know exactly what he's going to do yet, but you can have shots where maybe Ala is also approaching, moving through the space. And of course, my camera gets stuck. I'm still, I know how to navigate in other programs really well. I still always have problems, but I can do it just fine in any other program.
But that's all part of what this program is about. Not this program as an Unreal, but the show is about, is us making this and stumbling as we go. And then at the end, having something cool.
Yeah. At one point, I thought maybe there's going to be water here, but I did have trouble with the reflections. Like the fire doesn't really, some of these fires that look great don't really reflect well at all. Like they don't show up in reflections. There's probably a way to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. I probably could figure it out, but I would spend days working on it. We also are on a very tight deadline. So a lot of times if I'm thinking of, I have ideas in my head that I want to do, and if they don't work out, I quickly have to calculate, okay, how long is it going to take me to work out? It's going to take 2 days or at least 1 day to work this problem. And it's not really worth it at that point, right? Every day that I lose stresses me out. So I decided let's just drop it. It's not worth it. Let me show you a few frames, right? So we have our kind of a master angle for now. This is reverse.
So the tribe is called, they're the leopards.
Yeah, they're leopards. Right, this is the close-up of this. I'm working on this drum right now. So this drum is from Mega Scans, which is not complete.
Can I show something really quick? So these
Yeah.
drums play a huge role because this is the music. So you would have the drummers, boom.
Yes, and we're gonna have. I'll let it play.
Yeah, I mean that's it. But
yeah, so the music is actually gonna have shots where it's gonna go to the beat of the actual music. So that means we're probably gonna have tight close-up shots. So that's gonna be a hero piece. So I have to make that look good, and I don't want to just shove a bunch of crap on top of that drum because it's gonna look like I shoved everything together, right? Here's a few more angles that Miguel framed. This one I think is really cool. This is also very cool. So this would be Ala looking at Koa over here, right?
just so you guys know, from a story point of view, this is where Allah. Remember, this is our Cain and Abel story. And if you lose track, Allah is Abel, Cain is Koa, right? So that's how clever we are. This is a part where Allah gets initiated into the hunting crew. She becomes a hunter, and she's given one of the masks. The masks is the logo of our film, right? And Allah and Koa is not, because she's terrible at what she does. So this is a moment of like jealousy where she sees her sister be initiated into this incredible ceremony, and she looks back jealous. So yeah.
Yeah. A few more angles. And here's another angle. I think this was really neat.
This is a great angle. But let's say, for example, on a shot like this, one of the things I really want to try to figure out, as much as I like how that fire looks, if I could get, I've been trying to see if there's a way to get the Nuke to the Unreal to Nuke plugin to work, because I would just replace all of that foreground fire. I would just use a real element. I think it looks great for Unreal, but I think we can make this even better. I really hope that Nuke to Unreal script is fixed.
Yeah. The other thing we talk about is like just having some dust particles. So like if you look at some of these shots, it would be really cool where you can see the blue light, and the blue light is supposed to be the nighttime light from the moon creeping in, but it would be really nice if we had some dust particles coming out, and it would be better if we can just control that in comp rather than just trying to do that all in Unreal. But this is where I'm at here, and I'm almost done. I need like another day. And again, every day, like when I work, I track my progress, and I go, I only have this much time to do this. In the back of my head, I feel very stressed out because I know that I only have unrealistic amount of time to do stuff, right? So I'll show you some my really poor man's concept. So and then we don't, and our concepts are not good because I don't really I don't have time, right? So I'm telling
They're
like I don't have
literally for us.
Yeah, they're for us, and I feel like I don't have a day to lose on anything on a tight schedule. So I definitely don't have a day to try to do a nice concept at all. So here's a screenshot of what it looked like before. These are some scanned characters that I don't know Miguel got, and I took them out because I haven't figured out how to make them work quite yet. And then what I did was I just grabbed images from the internet. So these are like altar pieces, which I actually do want to bring these in. And let me show you some of my pure rough stuff. So I spent, and I have to spend time researching too, right? So, and gathering references. And a lot of people don't do this enough, I think. One of the biggest things I do with my students is yell at them for not having enough references. I mean, I don't really yell at them, but I give them a lot of grief when they don't have enough references. This is where you get your ideas. This is how
half yell at them.
Half yell.
Whenever I hear you like getting frustrated at a student, I'm like, here it comes, and I hear the word reference like 30 times. Where's your reference? Where's your reference? So
yes, exactly. That's one of my biggest pet peeve. Yeah. So I looked up African Edo art, and Miguel was actually the first one who found this. And then of course, like that's what our leopards are based on, right? So I gathered these here, and I kept looking at, this one's not African. This is not Edo art. This is fawn art. And I'm probably pronouncing everything really wrong, but I do want to integrate these pieces. They're not very large scale, but I think that they're critical because they're they're a smaller level of detail. And even though it's smaller, it's actually kind of nicer, right? We don't have a lot of things right now that are at the scale of the actual size of the character. So I do want to make these, and they shouldn't be that difficult. But I started looking at these sculptures here, and they're actually really, really beautiful. I really like this one a lot, but it doesn't really fit, right? I don't know how the donkey fits, right? And they're not big. These sculptures are actually look really small. Some of these here are just like handles, right? This one in particular really inspired me a lot. And again, this is just like a handle, so it's the size of like a little bit bigger than my hand. But I started looking at this and I started trying to imagine, how does this look? How could I get this? How would this look if this was large? So I took those shots or those images and I started trying to put stuff in. And you can see this is like a really work off. But I'm like, I can quickly tell this is not the effect that I want. So I got rid of that. And I took these ones in and I go, okay, I think I can see something here. And I did a really sad painting like this. And I just started sculpting it from there. A lot of times when you're, the other thing that's kind of tricky when you're looking at this stuff, it doesn't look like Michelangelo. It does take a lot of skill to actually do it though. It's not on the same level like as a Renaissance sculpt, but there's a certain aesthetic and a certain style that is difficult to capture. So I spend time kind of studying it and going, okay, what's consistent across? And the key things are their forms are simple. They're not anatomically correct, but they have a lot of pattern and a lot of details, right? And so you can see all that stuff here. You can also see there's this leopard motif. So if you look over here and here, there's constantly leopards everywhere. So really, I'm just ripping off all this stuff, and that's my concept. And then trying to get it to work. If I show you the sculpt here, here's one of the guys. It stopped. I don't know why it's not maximizing. Give me 1 second. Notice that this happens sometimes in ZBrush. I'll just close this out and reload this file. I don't think I actually did an amazing job with the sculpt at all, because again, I'm trying to do this all in one day, right? So I don't have a lot of time to spend.
Tran and I are always talking about how folk art is always done incorrectly. Like people modernize it or they art stationify it. And it's very hard to turn off everything and go back to like a completely primitive style that goes completely against everything right? Like John Brown would be screaming at the fact that the eyes are flat like that, right?
Yes.
So you have to turn that off. The eyes are curved with the skull. Nope, not here. They're not.
Yeah, like there's like a lot of U shapes,
Yeah.
right? Very, very angular, very cylindrical, primitive types of forms with just a lot of details sculpted in it. And you can see when I get close, they look soft. But I just don't have time to actually really polish this. I don't really have specific techniques for how I do this. The one thing I did do that kind of saved me a lot of time, and then it's kind of sad, but I'll show you, right? So basically I might make something like this cylinder. And then I might go, yeah, okay, let me just divide this or whatever to get it smooth. And then I would just come in here and just Dynamesh it. Something like that. And then you can do symmetry like this, right? So I know the easiest way for me to do these patterns is if everything is round, right? So here, I'm going to turn on radial symmetry, and I'm going to put it on Y and turn off X. So now I have all, you can see my mouse, and you can see how it's radiating around. And then I can control the radial count like this, right? So I would just set some kind of count. And then from there, I would just go, okay, let's just do this. Let's grab this and increase my strength. and start punching in these patterns. It's a little bit sad, but it worked. So that was one thing I did, and that's how I got to do this really quickly. Because again, I don't have a lot of time. The other trick that I tried, and it's not perfect either. So I basically try to hide all my mistakes. So, and you're going to see this here. What I did here, let me just cancel, is under my tools, I go to my surface, I turn on my noise, and I'm going to load the plugin, which popped up on my wrong screen, and I just start trying to see what could work. So weave was one thing I used a lot, and I'm just going to say okay, and we can't really see it. So I can increase my strength. Now, when I do that, there's 2 noise scales going on. There's just the default noise, which is this high frequency noise, and then there's the weave noise. You can turn it off by turning the mix basic noise to 0. And now I can just see my weave, and then I can just scale this up. So I would do something like that. And I would say, okay. And then now I can apply it to the mesh, and now I would have something like that. The other thing I would do pretty often is just like mask out an area like this, turn this on, say okay, and increase my strength, turn that off here, and rescale this. Now, the downside to this is sometimes it can stretch, right? But again, I just try to embrace it and go, yeah, that's cool. But I can also rotate something like that and just say okay, and apply that to the mesh. This is not a really high res mesh. It's also a little weak, so I can increase this a little bit. Say okay, and apply it, and then I would have something like that. And then that's how I would get some of my patterns and try to work quickly. The other thing that is difficult in terms of trying to manage your time is just trying to push everything through an entire pipeline, right? So even if something like this takes me a couple hours to sculpt, right, like 3 hours, it's still going to take me, or even 2 hours, it's still going to take me a whole day just to process this, right? So I'd have to, once I'm done with this, I sculpt it at a high level, which has, it's all Dynamesh, and the mesh is really dirty. But I do need a low res mesh, right? So I have to Z-remesh it. That's what I used in this one. Once it's Z-remesh, I have to UV it, and then I have to decimate, bring this into substance, texture it, and decimate it, right? And then at the end, just by running through all the steps, your whole day is like done, right? I'll show you some of the substance painters. I mean,
when I talked about how you compartmentalized like the bottom and the top and everything.
Right. So the other thing I thought is, even though I did, this is one statue, I did think like, once I go into Unreal, I might come up with some cool ideas, just how to smash stuff together. Right. And alone, these pieces are not really that impressive. But I thought, hey, this could be a column for something later. Right. There's like the leopard motif here. Some blades. Maybe I don't want the blades, so I separate them like this. I'll show you what it looks like in substance, but I actually should show you how I tried to rebash some of these together. So if I hide this, well, I took the staff here and I just rotated, duplicated it 3 times to make this like weird leopard face that's smashed together. And I turned into a torch.
Which the leopard mask represents a lot, right? That is the envy.
Yes, that's the symbol of the clan.
That's what one girl got that the other one did not get.
Yes. So I took these here and I just bashed them together, right? I made these guys kind of look like they had like a lot of different arms, but it's basically the standing guy what I was showing you inside ZBrush, replicated 3 times over. And then I took the sitting one, which is a separate sculpt, and I just made them sit right here because I thought they would look kind of cool. And I think it works, right? Far away, I mean, if you come up close and you try to look for any accuracy for this, it's not really that accurate. But when you're far away, you go, oh, it's just a lot of detail. It's a lot of complexity, right? It's simple form with the language is simple form with lots of detail and complexity. So that worked out there. And let me just load this up. Give me 1 second. Let's get this the standing guy.
Does anybody have any questions for Tran? And by the way, I figured out the camera misalignment stuff, so I'll show you guys that when this is done.
Okay. So here's the texture for here. This is based on the smart material that I made for the leopard. If I break it down, let's just turn this off here. And let's just hide these guys. So these guys are in pieces because I kept them separate, again, just to make sure that I can keep them modular. What I have here is a bronze base material. So I got this base material from Substance Source, right? I have an account that I pay for, and it's worth it because it actually speeds up my time, so I don't have to build this from scratch. I just bring it in, put it on top, and it gives me some of this breakup, additional stuff here. So if I turn this off, this is what I have. The first step in Substance is when I bring it in, I'm actually bringing in my low mesh, which actually looks like this. Right now, my low mesh is still pretty high because at the end of the day, I can't displace anything inside of Unreal. So on a regular VFX film pipeline, this would normally be a little bit lower, and we would actually displace the detail. And in this case, it's not a good idea to do that. The details also transfer over more easily if I start with a higher base mesh, right? So this is almost 200,000. Then what I do is I just export the high as it is, just like this, right? And then I go into Substance Painter and I actually bake this out right here, right? So if I don't have the bake out, you would just see the soft version of it, okay? So these are all my high settings here. Then once I apply this, I have this base. And I thought this was kind of boring. So one of the things with when you're working with metal and bronze or any kind of metal that's kind of a homogeneous color, it tends to look over simple. So if I bring in color variations, so I have this pink material here, which is super simple, right? That's slightly more pink and slightly shinier than the one underneath it. But you can see how that looks just by combining another one, right? Because most likely when this stuff ages or develops patina, it's not always going to be very even everywhere. As far as how it's applied, what I do is I use a lot of the mask editor, which I'll break that down here. Once you bake out your mesh maps, right? So first step, import, go to this button, bring in your high model, and then you're going to hit bake. That takes a long time to bake, so I don't want to show this step because we'll just spend the whole time looking at this. Then it's going to produce all these maps that you see around here, right? Once it has that information, if I create this mask here, this is hidden right now because it's black. Let me just do this from scratch. I'm actually explaining this really poorly. Let me remove this mask. Okay, so now I have my bronze material that I want to mix on top, and you can see it's just overtaking this very quickly. I'm going to apply a black mask, which hides everything, okay? And if I alt-click on this mask here, I can see this is all black. Now, once I have all my mesh masks baked up, I can go to this magic wand, add a generator, and a generator is empty. And I just load, say, something like a mask editor, like this, and you can see it sees all this detail, right? And again, black and white basically reveals the mask. So anything that's white will start to show that. When I'm in here, I can go to my curvature, and my curvature is basically reads my forms, And I can slide this around and go, no, I want it to look, for example, maybe like this. I can increase the strength right here. This curvature part is actually really amazing. If I turn everything off here, you can see it's black. The font may be too tiny to see, but basically this says huge. So this will read my huge forms. This says big, and this will read my big forms. Large will read large. It kind of looks like big. And then medium, so medium forms, and soft. So I basically have everything in control as a slider. So I can work super, super fast inside Substance. Now I might have something like this, and it works much better, but it's a little soft and it's kind of airbrushy. So what I can do on top of that is I can go to Magic Wand. I'm going to add a fill. Now this fill is on top, right? So I just have nothing in here. If I go over to this button here, which is texture maps, I can search a grunge like this and try out whatever I think works. So maybe something like, I was just going to put this in here, some kind of grunge, drop this in, and you can see I have this on top. If I'm worried about seams, which I'm probably having seams, so I can see them here, I can change my projection mode to triplanar, which makes it 3D. So now it's just projecting in 3D space, right? I can even move this up and down, and I can use the hotkey, like Maya hotkey. So I hit R and I can scale. Now this is on top of this, but if I set this here, just like Photoshop, to overlay, you can see what it does. So here, what this does is it helps to break up some of this airbrushing, and I can scale this up. And you can see now I have this nice breakup on top of that, right? So I just break it up like this, and then very quickly I'll have something like that. The next layer that I built was the oxidation, which is really similar. I use, again, a generator under here. This is a group. So if I hide this, let me show you what's in the group. I have three materials. I basically start out with this really ugly thing, which is just solid green, right? I create a darker green like this. I put a mask on it. Inside this mask, I just threw in, again, a fill, just like how I showed you before. I put in some random texture. Now what that does is it gives me breakup here. And I felt I need another one. So I create a more bluish color that's a little bit more shiny. And again, applied a mask. And I got this kind of weird pattern, okay? Within this, while I'm doing this, I can actually add height. So I can go in here and say, I want this to be bumpy, and I want to bump out by increasing my height, giving it positive value. I can go to my blue layer here, push it in like that. So now I have like a detailed oxidized area. And then this is all being controlled by group. So if I apply a mask here, I put a black mask, it hides it. Then I go into my mask. Again, I add the generator, blur it a little bit, and I get this. And I basically just layered this a couple times over. Each pretty much the same thing, just different layers of masking, just to get more control. And then I had a third layer here, and then a fourth one, right? So it's pretty simple to do this. Once I have this created, I can just create a smart material. Now to create a smart material, you have to put everything into a group like this. Right click, create smart material. So I'll just create one. I'm going to rename this. At least try. I'll call this COA test. Then I'll right click this group, create smart material. Give it a second, because it's probably thinking, and it will just pop up here. Now, if I brought in a new model, I would have something like this. I can just drop this on top. You see I deleted that. And it would just inherit all that behavior. And then that allows me to work really fast.
Yeah.
right? And I did the same thing here. It's fast, but it's not fast because again, it takes so much time to export and just push everything through the pipe. The next step I would do is I go back into ZBrush. I really want this high detail, but it's 12 million. Even though Unreal can handle a lot of geometry, it's probably a really bad idea to just move around something that's 12 million.
You know what it is? It's not so much that it can't handle it. It can't handle it on import. Once it's in, it'll handle it.
It can handle it. I just think it's not. You're just probably going to start choking faster, right? You do start hitting delays and stuff. So I just decimate it and I bring it in, and then I take my time to move things around and try to set dress it. I don't have, we don't have like fleshed out concepts. So, once I'm in here, I'm just playing around to try to figure out what to do. The other thing that I'm working right now, again, is the drum. So the drum is really great because it's from Megascans. So that means it's a scan, but it's Japanese, and that does not actually fit our aesthetic. So what I'm working on right now, and I'll just show you, it's not complete. I wish it was done so I could show you the whole step. I'll probably show you a part of what I'm doing, even if it makes not a lot of sense, because I still think it's pretty handy. So I downloaded this from Megascans, and it doesn't have any subdivisions, right? It's 60 million polys. I know I need to modify it. What I want to modify it to, let me show you some reference, is to make it feel more African, because again, it's a Japanese type of drum. I want to add a lot of this rope work, and I think when the light hits it, I know it's going to look good, right? So when the details are hitting the surfaces inside of the scene, of the ceremony scene, that's what makes it look better, right? So I know that once I have little speck hits and lights onto this rope details, it's going to look really cool. And again, the shot is going to be really close, so I really don't want to do a sloppy job. It's one of the things where I weigh out, okay, I could just shove everything together and it'll be faster, but how nice will that look in the shot? I know it's close, so I decided, okay, let's weigh this out. I'm going to invest time into making this better, right? And it is an investment in time. So the problem with something like this, that scan data, is it's not easy to modify, because it's hard to modify something that is 16 million. So I actually need to rebuild this mesh to be something lower. And what is the fastest way to do this for me? There's multiple ways to do this. What I did here is I duplicated this, and I want to Z remesh this, right? The problem is if I just hit Z remesh, it's going to give me topology that's not easy to work with. When I look at this rope detail, what I'm actually looking at here is how this interacts with the top of the surface. So you can feel here that the rope is being tied around, and there's a sense of compression, right? And I really thought hard for like 5 minutes about if I should do this or not, because I know it's going to take time. It's going to take me a whole day to do this, right? And every day, again, is very valuable time. But okay, so this is worth it. Now, if I want to actually push this in, I could try sculpting this, but this is not, again, 60 million is really, really hard to work with, even in ZBrush. So now I know I have to remesh this. And what I want to do is remesh this inside of, or modify this inside of Maya. Okay, so let me just load this up here. And it's a pen, so I can just draw. What I need is I want this compression. So I know in my head that I want a clean edge loop right around here. That way I can easily just, extrude or push it in, just grab polygons and push it in really fast. So if I Z remesh it, it's not going to give me that. So I have two routes I can think of. I can use my Z remesh guide. I gave that a shot, but that's kind of a pain because it's kind of wobbly when I draw it. So the way I did this here, You know, every time I do this, I get worried that I'm very terrible at explaining stuff. Let me just load this up here. I tried to save my steps so I can show.
I mean, the thing is, all they got to get is a general idea, and then, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
So Miguel will reassure me.
Yeah, if you want like the in-depth thing, just ask more questions or go to Gnomon.
Yes, you can go to Gnomon.
Yeah.
And then I'll show you exactly how I did it. Okay. So I polygrouped all this, and you can polygroup something pretty easy just by holding Control, masking an area like this, and hitting Control W, and that gives me a polygroup. Once I had this polygroup here, I went into Geometry ZRemesh, right? And I'm going to keep my groups. So I just turn this on, and then I just press this button, and that takes a long time. So let me load up what it looks like once I do that. Okay, so once this is ZRemesh, it gives me this mesh here. You can see what I mean by not having clean topology. So this would be hard to kind of extrude and work with. But up here, because I just did the polygroup, I have really clean edge loops. Once I have this, I take this into Maya, which I have right here, and I just quickly UV it, right? And I gave it 2 UDIMs so that it could have more textural resolution. Okay, and then I bring it back into ZBrush, and then I project the details. Now the one step that I do, I'll just do it here. I won't complete all the steps because it takes a long time, is I project this detail onto this low one because this low one doesn't have anything. But aside from, normally most people use it just to project geometry, but the other thing I have to factor in is that I also have textures, right? So I need to bake this texture from this high mesh that has no workable geometry onto this low mesh. What I do here is I'm going to select this original one, and I'm going to import the textures. I think this is a great workflow for when you clean scans, which means if you're doing a lot of stuff on Unreal, you're going to have to clean scans. So I load this here, which it's from Megascans. Right now I have my texture. I'm going to flip this vertical because you have to flip everything vertical for your textures. Okay. And now I'm going to go to texture map, and I'm going to load this texture. Okay, cool. So now I have this really awesome piece in here, but I need to transfer it. It's not going to transfer as a texture. I have to convert this to polypaint. Polypaint is basically vertex color, right? If I go to polypaint and I press polypaint from texture, it's going to take my texture and turn it into polypaint. Okay, I had an error. I had to make sure that I have this on. Polypaint from texture. Give it a second. Seems like it converted it. So now I'm going to test it to make sure. I'm going to turn off my texture, and you can see now it's polypaint. Okay. Now polypaint is dependent on the resolution of your mesh. So you're going to see that as I try to transfer this. So I now have my high-res mesh that has my high detail and it has my texture. And I have this low one that doesn't have anything, like this. And I'm going to project the details. I'm going to turn on this paintbrush icon over here, and I have to set to solo. I'm going to go under project here, make sure it projects geometry and the color at the same time. And I'm just going to hit project all. Give it a second, and you can see it's captured this information. Now you can tell it's really blurry because that's what polypaint is based on. It's based on your geometry. So I have to divide it a couple times. I'm going to hit divide, and I'm going to project again. Right? And I basically, if I look at my count here, it's 16 million. I have to divide this as close as I can to 16 million. So I'll just do it one more time. And again, I won't complete this because the last steps take a long time to actually project. And this is what I mean by time. Like you can't erase the amount of time it takes to to process this stuff. Okay, so you can see as I'm doing this, I have something much nicer, right? Eventually I end up with this here. Give it a second to load. Okay, so here's my cleaned up one, right? This has good topology. It has UVs. And then it has the texture. Now the texture is polypaint. It's not actually a texture yet. So I can't do anything with it, but I can export this. You have to go in Z plugins, multi-map exporter, and we're going to do texture from polypaint. The benefit for the multi-map exporter is that it actually supports UDIMs. So there's many ways you can extract your texture, but you won't actually have anything other than your first UDIM. If you use the multi-map exporter and you have 4 UDIMs, it's going to spit out all 4 UDIMs. So my settings are super simple. You do want to do a couple things here when you export this, right? I'm going to go export options. It's under file names. Unreal is set to read UDIM format, which is just a naming system for the textures, right? So you can tap on this and you can change it and just set this to UDIM. And you just want to make sure that you're doing this at 4K, press create all maps. That only gave me the albedo. So I had to repeat this step a few times in order to get my roughness and my norm map displacement map, right? But now I have a clean mesh that I can modify. And right now it looks like a waste of time when I'm looking at it. If I come back here, let's just look at this one right here. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to do this from scratch. And what I did is I exported the base mesh. Have this. Let's assign a new material, a Lambert, like this. And I want to model the ropes now. Now, I know you can do this in ZBrush, but I have a super fast technique that is really, 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 really fast. And I'm not going to do it there in ZBrush because I have this technique. Now, this technique relies on a couple things. It relies on the fact that your model has to be centered. So my pivot is 0, right? 0, 0. The other thing with this technique is I really want this to be symmetrical all around. So really perfect. So what I did here, or what I'm in the middle of doing, is I create a cylinder like this. And I'm just going to increase the resolution of this to like maybe, 60, like that. So it's really smooth. I go to my top-down view. Now the cylinder is it's a perfect cylinder, right? And it's centered in the middle. And I'm just scaling this down. And I can see that the drum doesn't really align, right? So I'm using this as a guide to help me. Then I'm going to grab my drum that's a little bit off, and I'm going to go under deform, and I'm going to create a very basic lattice, right? So let's hit apply. And I'm going to change my subdivisions to 3, 3 here. So now I have this. And I just grab this and move this so that it fits this. And again, all these steps, they pay off. If I miss any of these steps, it's not going to work out as well. Okay, so now I have something that is almost perfect. I'm going to keep this here just as a guide. So I don't want to delete it. I could delete my lattice if I want to, like this, or bring it back. And then what I'm going to do is start modeling the rope. Now, the technique, I think I showed it a little bit a couple of streams ago, but I think this one will kind of show, at least to me, more of the power of it. So I want to do the rope here, and I'm going to keep this slow so it's really easy to modify. So the default rope at 20 subdivisions and my axis is a bit too high. I need at least 8 to go around to support a round shape, right? And again, the pattern I'm looking for is something like, actually more like this. So I want it really complex. The more complex, the cooler it looks when light hits it, right? And what I'm going to do first is count how many knots I have. So I ended up with maybe 20, right? So going around the whole thing. Now, it's a round object. So that means it's a round object is 360 degrees. So 360 degrees divided by 20 gives me like 18 degrees separation between each knot. So I'm going to grab this here. I'm going to group this. You can see here I have this grouped, and I'm going to group it again. So I have a subgroup. Now I'm going to grab this here, go to create, or actually go to edit, duplicate special, and I'm going to set this to instance. And I'm going to put my rotation, which I just did the math for, at 18 degrees, and I'm going to hit apply until it comes around. Now what happens with the technique of grouping, you can see I'm just controlling one model, and it's giving me, it's controlling everything. So I'm going to start scaling this stuff up and moving it to place. Now, if I look at my pattern, it's actually like a double rope being twisted around, right? So I want another one here. Let's actually hide this because it's confusing me, right? So I can just duplicate this, and it's going to duplicate over like that, which is pretty cool. But I can also do another thing, and this is going to get like inception here. Let's go back to my instance duplicate special here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this back to 0. I want this to be mirrored. So let's go over here. Let's look at my front view. Let's isolate select. You can see I have this in the center, and I'm just going to put this over here. And what's important here is my pivot needs to be zeroed out along this grid here, right? So I'm just going to freeze and reset my pivot. And I'm going to do a negative scale of 1. I'm going to hit apply, right? Now, when I move this like this, you can see that it's duplicating over. And I can just grab this and start extruding this. Well, it's actually a little too fat. Let's make it skinnier. Let's move this over like this.
Duplicated and mirrored.
Yes. It's duplicated. It's actually inception-y. Hold on. Let's put this on a reference. And I can start extruding this. And then very quickly, I start to see the pattern starting to form. Right? Now I only have this. I really should have another cylinder in here. So I'm just going to create a cylinder outside of this system. Okay. I'm going to set this to, again, 8 subdivisions. I'm going to take this cylinder. I'm going to drop it into my original subgroup like this. Oops. There you go. And you see it just pops in. And actually going to leave this down here. And I'm going to duplicate this. So this is basically a hack. And then very quickly, I can just grab this, rotate this, and I can also visualize everything that I'm doing. And I use this technique a lot, right? So now I can come here and go, okay, I have a couple rope pieces. I wouldn't model this all in one piece because it's kind of too much work. And I can look at this here and go, okay, hey, you know what? This is also symmetrical. If we look at this rope here, everything is symmetry, symmetry, symmetry. So it's kind of looking at it and going, where is it symmetrical, right? So this piece right here, this is what I'm doing. I can see that if I cut this in half, I can just make a mirror of this, like that. So instead of doing both sides in this one, I can say, okay, you know what? Let's come here. Let's check out my piece here. Let's just snap this. Let's go to object mode, isolate just this one piece. Snap this over here, delete the inside face. And I'm going to just instance this one also. again with duplicate special. This time I'm going to do negative scale again. Let's freeze this out, actually, and do negative scale. And now you can see I just have to work on one side, and very quickly I can have this mirrored. And to me, this technique is much faster than trying to do this in ZBrush. You know, but it's what you're comfortable with, right? So Maya is still a pretty good tool with this. And then pretty much at the end, if I look at what I actually modeled, it would just be like.
And the setup is harder than the actual modeling.
Yes, but I have the setup down. When you do this for the first time, you don't have it down and you're going to be confused, which is normal. Anything you do the first time is confusing. But
now you're going to attach those two.
Yes, now I can attach all that stuff. The other thing I can do is if I UV this, and this saves me, this is also why it's great to do it in here, right? If I come in here, you know, and I UV this, let's just do a projection and pretend that I did this awesome job.
You're only UVing one.
Yeah, I'm only UVing one. And you can see why I'm doing this, even though I have those hidden. Those points are highlighting because it's actually doing it to every single one. So all I have to do is actually just UV these pieces, and then that's it, right? At the end, I have to convert this back from instance to regular model so that I can give them unique UVs and stuff. Now, when you convert this, you have to convert it in the same hierarchy that you created it. So if I grab a section like this that's in the subgroup, and I go to modify, convert instance to object, let's just have this window open. What can happen is everything can just vanish, right? I don't seem to be able to create that error. Let's try it here. There you go. So here it is. I messed it up by doing that, right? So if you don't reconvert this properly, you're going to break everything. So what I instanced was not the subgroup, but the top group. So I'm going to grab the top group, which is where I created my instance, and go instance to object. This shader assignment broke, but it's fine. It's not a big deal. You just have to reassign a new material to it. But again, it works and it's intact, right? And that's all I have to do. Within the subgroup, I also have miniature instances. So I have to go into here and just select the object itself and convert it, and then I'm done. But that's the process here. Anyway, I think it's cool. Even if you don't want to modify something, you can use this technique, what I showed you here, just how to clean up a scan. So if you are using like something like reality capture and you need to make this mesh workable to modify it, this is exactly the pipeline I would use. Just z-remeshing it, turning it into polypaint, and then transferring it over and making it workable. So
cool. So, well, that was awesome. So thank you, Tran. Does anybody have any questions for Tran? Where she got those amazing hot toys in the background? Those are all mine, by the way. So, okay. So, okay. So one thing I wanted to show was when I was showing the camera setup, there was a misalignment. And I said it probably has to do with the camera focal back or the film back size. So it absolutely was that. So pretty simple. Just when you go into your camera settings, make sure that you take note of this here. So you can see the film gate, and here it's 35 millimeter. This is something that a lot of people don't really think about. They just go, oh, 35 millimeter is 35 millimeter. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you buy, depending if you know about cameras, if you buy like an FX line Nikon or a DX line Nikon, and you put a 35 millimeter on each one, on the full sensor one, it might look exactly like this. But then if you get, I think it's the DX line, and you put on that 35 millimeter lens, all of a sudden, it's actually cropped in like this or even smaller, and you're like, wait a minute, why is this, if they're both 35 millimeter, why is this one acting more like a 50 or a 60 millimeter lens, and this one is acting like the original 35 millimeter lens? And that's because it has a different film gate, sensor size, okay? So the reason why it was misaligning was just make sure that you set the correct film gate here, and then in Unreal, when you select the camera, that it has the correct one as well. So you could see here, it's kind of hard to see here because I have my outliner, but they line up perfect.
Yeah, that's much better.
So it's actually even bigger than that, so you can see here. So, and let me just go to camera. Another thing is camera settings. So anyway, you want to do that because that's going to make sure that everything is correct, okay? But that's it.
Yeah. I think Miguel has the way harder job.
It doesn't matter. As long as we get this done, that's all that matters.
Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, our goal is not who does what, but how do we get this to look good?
How do we get this done? Yeah.
How do we get this done? How do we get it to look good? And we don't care who does what.
There's no ownership. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Miguel's way better at troubleshooting than I am, so it makes sense for him to do all that stuff.
So does anybody have any questions before we go? So remember, just set your film back 35 millimeter Academy in Maya, 35 millimeter Academy, and they should line up. Okay. So, all right, well, that's it for today, I guess, if no one has any questions. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, Half Empty, Half Miguel, Half Tran. And thank you guys for checking the stream out. So, yeah, that's it.
All right, we'll be back next week with some other stuff.
Let me see, which one of these do I press? This one, this one, this one. All right, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.